Well, family full of pilots.
All right, daughter and grandson. Thank you, Gil. Appreciate it. I'm going to introduce Becky Nunley. Becky was a former Rotarian. Where are you from?
Anniston, Alabama.
Alabama. And she works for Canterfield of Franklin. And she's a marketing director there. And she's in Rotary. So rejoining back to Rotary. So glad to have you.
Absolutely.
And that is all we got.
Mark McFerrin.
Oh, he's
Hey,
not here. Where is he?
He's right here.
Oh, he did come in. We're waiting on you. Mark's got it yet.
Yes, my friend, go ahead, stand. Dave Dunbar. Been here a good while. He's got some Rotary roots from his dad, so that we'll find out. But good guy that is well worth getting to know, and we're glad to have him in the community.
Yay.
Glad to have you, Dave. Lynn's guest showed up. There you go.
My guest is my pastor at Trinity Methodist Church. He lived in Israel for a year, approximately. And so I knew he'd want to hear this program, and we're happy he's here. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you, Lynn. That's it. Oh,
Okay. Now for Happy Bucks. Drew Rogers is going to.
We also have Stephen Hallback he was a visitor of Jennifer Bourne, and he's got his application in, so we're definitely happy to have him back. So
We're about to kick you in. So
Welcome, Stephen. We're glad that you're here. Thank you for joining us, and for all of our visitors, thank you for being here. Hey, that's one good reason to be happy. I'm a banker. We just had our largest bank failure since the financial crisis that was announced this morning. So listen, I'm happy because we've got guests, we've got a great program, but anyone else happy that want to talk about something other than a bank failure?
This is a big week for crane construction. They celebrated their 90th anniversary this
oh,
week.
wow.
I was there 44 years.
That's awesome.
90th anniversary as a company. That is amazing. That company's seen a lot. Who else is happy? Oh,
Alan,
come on, we got more. Who else is happy? We got the SEC basketball tournament.
Alan Treadway's happy.
Alan Treadway. Are you sure?
I tell you what, it's my favorite time of year. And I'm glad y'all are here to hear me say this, but my pick for the national championship, I think they run the table, Tennessee Vols, you know, and also go Belmont Bruins.
Is that just because they beat you yesterday? Okay. Well, I did put $1 in because I'm glad that I'm happy that it's tax season, because Steve Passon cannot be here to give me a hard time about Arkansas beating Auburn last night. So
Steve is online.
well, tell him.
Steve, if you'd like to reply, say something.
War Eagle, Steve. That's a good thing. Anybody else happy?
No reply.
I'm happy on a few different reasons. I am feeling definitely Rotarian today. I joined the Green Hills chapter in the morning club today. It was really great, and it really got me very inspired on some people that you probably know, but I didn't know about him. But Boyd Fulton, that just unfortunately just passed, and just to hear, it's a very smaller club, so they do something what we're doing here, but they pretty much everybody stands up and talks, and they just shared how wonderful this guy was. And when you met him, you walked away just feeling so inspired and appreciative. And it was just kind of got me even more motivated to like think of our legacy, because unfortunately, or fortunately, depends on how you look at it. We'll leave this earth one day. And what do you want to be remembered as? And so his spirit and his energy are living on. And so that's kind of the awesome part about Rotary, that even when we're gone, part of us will live on, hopefully. So I'm really happy about that.
Cool.
Very well said. Thank you, Zach. Do we have anyone else that is happy today? With that, President Jane.
Thank you, thank you. So Drew works for a bank and I work for a railroad, so we're batting 1,000 between the two of us.
We've had a good run. Just to be clear, it's not my bank that failed. No,
No,
it's not my bank that
either.
failed.
To be clear.
Just to be clear. Thank you.
Okay. In West Virginia, but it wasn't, anyway, yeah. So, but it wasn't in Ohio. It was not in Ohio. All right. So now on that happy note, we will have our Rotary Minute. We actually have 2 Rotary Minutes today. So Susie Lindsay is going to go first, and then Sheila has something to share with us.
Thank you.
All right, keyword is Rotary Minute, so I'm going to talk fast. I joined Rotary 30 years ago because that's what you did, right? You came to a community, you joined the chamber, you joined Rotary, and you got involved and you met people. One of the things I never expected was how many great friends I would meet in Rotary. Friends I could count on for things like when I broke my leg, there were lots of people who drove me from place to place that I needed to go. Devin has helped me when I needed help with my lease. Curry and Ray helped me when I needed help with my son's car. Y'all have celebrated with me when exciting things happened in my life, like when I got married, when I adopted my son. You helped me when things were not so good. And then also I had great friends like Roger and Steve who went with me to an iguana rescue where we got to hold iguanas and take pictures. It was so awesome. I'm sure that's something they'll never forget. But it's not just the friendships and the people you meet, it's the things you can do in Rotary. So serving, obviously our motto is service above self. I joined Rotary. I was very excited to be and honored to be selected to serve our club as president. I've been able to serve our community on Pancake Day by making pancakes for people. Been able to serve our community by picking up trash on the Little Harpeth River. I was able to go to Belize and serve. We helped students provide clean water for them and also restrooms for them where they weren't in danger of falling through a hole into the stuff down below. So just volunteering and being able to serve. Those of you who have been in club a while remember John Miles. I was voluntold in 1999 that I was going to be John Miles's district conference chair. First off, I had never been to a district conference, but you all know you do not say no to John Miles. So I volunteered to help with district conference. I was able to serve our district and also work really closely with John Germ, who later on became a Rotary International president. Since then, I've gone on to do lots of district conferences. In fact, in May, it will be my 9th district conference. So that in itself is an opportunity for me to serve our club, to serve our district, to serve our zone, and to give back some of my talents. And also there's lots of cool things that go when you serve like that. I mean, I have found out that if you stalk a couple Rotary International past presidents, they'll let you take their picture with them, and including the incoming president. I've got great pictures of me and all the Rotary presidents that I stalk. But service is what's good about Rotary. It gives you an opportunity to belong, to make great friends, and to serve. That's why I joined Rotary instead of any of the other civic clubs out there. And hopefully you all feel the same. Thanks.
Hello, I'm Sheila Cleveland. I'm here to talk about RYLA. That's Rotary Youth Leadership Award Program. And it's for rising seniors and rising juniors, but we're not too picky. We just give priority to them. It is an incredible program at Austin Peay. And it's a week long, and our Rotary Club sponsors 5 students, and it's about $500. And even if we have more applications, I talked to Bob Huffman, we will find someone to sponsor them because we don't want any child left behind, basically. And so I do have a 3.5-minute video that explains it all.
Good, lock up. I'm going to count to 3. 2 times over, the 3rd time straight through. Look right here. I know you can do this. 2 times over. 1, lock those hips back. 2, lock those hips back. And 3, go straight through. There you go. We're ready. We hope you are. It is going to be an absolutely fabulous year. This is the largest RYLA the District 6760 has ever had. There's 65 of you here assembled today.
You learn more about yourself and how you should like handle people and make new friends quickly. Ryla is like really fun. You do many activities. It could be like really frustrating at sometimes, but at the end, there's always a purpose and it's worth it.
I think Ryla means teamwork and leadership and trusting others and learning about yourself, and like you can honestly do way more than you'd ever expect you'd be able to. And it's just a really great place. Everyone's got your back. You never feel like you're like excluded from the group. You're always in the middle of something, having fun. It's just awesome.
We actually have a Rotary Interact Club at my school, and me along with 2 other girls are in charge of running it this year. And so I'm definitely going to encourage them to come. I think it's a wonderful experience, really teaches you how to be a successful leader and to be able to trust others, develop relationships, and open up regardless of your personality.
Again, we all have a story. We all have experiences. It's not what we've experienced. It's what we do with those experiences. What are the life lessons that we learn as a result of the obstacles we encounter in life?
I feel like you all know that you have the potential to make the difference. But the thing is, you don't really know how to do that yet. Or you don't feel like you have the time to make the difference. You don't feel like you have the energy to make the difference, the connections, the money, all of that you need. You think later in life, when you're at a stable point, then that's when you will do it. But the thing is, it's not about doing it later in life. It's about living a life that is doing.
I just want to see more people come. I want to see more people of different races, of different ethnicities. I want to see a lot of different people come to this program because we need like a whole effort. We need effort from every point of view. Like we need everybody's input because one group of people can't change the world.
Together, they learn so much about the way people are, the way people work together. And I think the value in it is the diversity from all over the state and people being exposed to things they would never have been exposed to before without this.
1, 2, 3.
There was an obstacle course they called the Odyssey, and you pretty much had to depend on your teammates to get through it. It was built to be done with a group of people working together, and that was really cool. You kind of got a chance to carry out everything that you've learned, cooperation, patience, communication, anything that would be a characteristic of a leader.
I have seen so many students and talked to so many students that come out of this program. It is amazing. We're talking kids that are wallflowers that can barely speak to other people or stand up, raise their hand. They get all sweaty palmed and everything. Coming out here, I've had a couple we've actually had speak here about Ryla that was like that, going into Ryla and coming out confident. And these kids are our future. And we need future leaders, and Ryla does an excellent job. So if you could just spread the word about Ryla, I would appreciate it so much. I know it's on our website now, our Facebook page, and I do as much as I can with the school systems promoting it, but the more we can get, the more future leaders. Thanks.
Now we have just a couple quick announcements and we will move on to our program. Julie Porter's going to talk about Pancake Day.
All right, guys. So we're 3 weeks away from April 1st, which is Pancake Day. On your tables are the assignments. So you can go ahead and take a look at where you're going to be working on Friday evening or Saturday. You will see a lot of yellow highlighted positions. Those are all the open spots. So if any of you all can pick up a second shift or a third shift, or bring a spouse or a neighbor or someone you go to church with, really, really would appreciate that. If you are working a spot or a shift that you can't do, just let me know. I'm happy to work with you and change that around if we need to. Also on your tables, you're also going to see Pancake Day tickets. These are for you all to take and hand out to coworkers, family, friends. So feel free to take a stack or however many you need. And then there are also posters on your tables. Those are also for you to take and hang up at your workplace or on your refrigerator, wherever you need to. There will be more next week, so let us know if you need more, and if you don't need them, just leave them there. They will collect them after the meeting. Any questions, you can just let myself know. Yeah. You can just kind of ignore that. That's just for us. So like we've got like Jordan Nielsen's like in zone 1, so she's kind of over like the kitchen area. I'm over zone 2 and 3, which is more like the outside. John's over more of the outside activities. And I was one thing I was gonna say, poor little Michael Hyman, he's our only clown this year. I'm sure he would love to have some buddies. Yeah. So if anyone would like to be a clown, I know Michael's always really good about helping and bringing extra costumes and stuff. I know you've done that in the past. So just let us know how you can help out. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I think the only other announcement is to please put on your calendars Club Social for April 29th. It's going to be a casino night. Should be really fun. It's going to be at the Andrews Cadillac dealership, and more information is forthcoming on that in the next few days. Anybody have anything else before we introduce our speaker? Okay, Sybil is going to introduce our speaker for the day.
See if I can do this without my glasses. Our speaker today is Ken Gluck, the son of a Holocaust survivor. Ken is the state education coordinator for the Tennessee Holocaust Commission. The commission brings all things Holocaust education to the entire state of Tennessee. They've been in operation since 1984 and is one of the oldest Holocaust remembrance organizations in the country. Ken and his family have lived in the greater Nashville area for 17 years. He is a former educator for the Wilson County Schools with a master's degree in education. Please join me in welcoming Ken Gluck.
First, thank you for having me here. I always like to start by telling you a little bit about the Tennessee Holocaust Commission, because the first question I get asked is, there's a Tennessee Holocaust Commission? Yes, there is. And as she stated, we are one of the oldest in the countries. Been here since 1984. Before that, there was not a lot of talking about in education about the Holocaust. My own father, as I was growing up, never spoke about it. I was always told not to ask him, not to ask his brothers, sisters. People kind of migrated towards each other because they had similar traumas, but it was never discussed, at least not in English. My father spoke 6 different languages, and it was always a different language that was being spoken in the house so that we didn't know what was going on. Not that they were trying to hide it, but it was more they didn't want to burden us with the knowledge of what they went through. And that's very, very common when you speak to people, other survivors, children, that they didn't know the stories and they unfortunately passed away with their parents. That's why I feel it's such a responsibility to try to share more stories, to talk about it, to bring education around the state. We cover the entire state. We educate not only students in public schools, private schools. We will talk to homeschool groups. We come out to places like this for community events. I've spoken at the one of the buildings for Amazon, trying to encourage. They wanted their employees to have some cultural diversity information. So we will present anywhere and everywhere that will have us. We don't charge for what we do. That's one of the most important things, is we don't want there to be a cost involved. We don't want anything to hinder the education that we can hopefully provide, not only for students, but for the community itself. We bring workshops for teachers, teach them how to talk about and educate students about the Holocaust, about Nuremberg laws and propaganda from the 30s and 40s that led into the Holocaust. And the reason it's important, above and beyond, is just an incredible event from history, is I will never use the term, never let it happen again. It happens. History repeats itself. Right now, things are going on in different parts of the world that are repeating that same process, the dehumanizing process, and the hatred for a group of people because they're part of a group rather than for who they are as a person or their own actions. That's something I was brought up with through my dad, that he taught me not to hate Germans, not to hate Nazis, judge each person by their own actions. And as I got older and older, I found it harder and harder to believe that that was something within him, because it is so easy to start hating people for who they are. And I've always tried very, very hard to not judge people because of that. So that's who we are as a group. One last thing I do want to mention, if anyone would like to come, again, things we do are free. Our next big program is March 28th, which is a Tuesday, 7 p.m. at MBA, which is on West End Avenue, Montgomery Bell Academy. We have a world-renowned speaker coming in. It is limited to 600 tickets. They're free tickets, but you have to sign up for it. We're at a little over 200 as we speak. It is Father Patrick Dubois. He is a Roman Catholic priest from France originally. He, on sabbatical, used to start backpacking through France and then expanded it to further into Europe, and kind of was one of the people at the forefront of what's called Holocaust by Bullets, which happened before the camp started. And he discovered so many thousands and thousands of deaths that were unrecorded by just talking to older people in the villages of, hey, what happened to the Jews from this small village? You know, no one ever asked me, but see that tree up on the hill? Yeah, they made them dig a big hole and they're all buried in there. So he discovered a lot of that and has made genocides, not just the Holocaust, but genocides throughout the world, his life's passion to uncover and work against them. Right now, he's in the Ukraine, working with them to try to uncover on both sides. There's evidence of war crimes, crimes against humanity. So he's trying to expose that. He is actually doing the work. He doesn't just write about it. He has written a number of books, but he is doing that work. So if anyone is interested, again, just go to our website, Tennessee Holocaust Commission, and tickets are available for that. Okay, moving on. The reason you asked me to be here, talk about my father, and I read this book last night. Okay, you don't believe me. I read it last night. It's an easy read. Okay, 6 million is a number. Sorry, 6 million is a number. I walk around a lot. That it becomes a statistic, because in people's minds, how many people in this room have ever seen specifically 6 million of something? Okay, it's a hard number to rationalize, okay, because it is that big, especially for kids. So I bring this whenever I speak. And if I know I'm walking away. It is. The word Jew is on every page, okay? Every single page, it's written Jew in columns, 4,800 times per page, okay? 1,250 pages. It's written 6 million times. This is 6 million. Okay, that means that's about 9 pages or so of this. That would be the city of Brentwood. Okay, just to put it into proportion, 9 pages, and they're very thin paper. 9 pages would be Brentwood itself. I show this wherever I go, like I said, so that you can easier kind of comprehend what 6 million is. The number most people don't know is as a result of the camps there were only about 250 to 300, maybe 325, depends on who you ask, thousand people that survived, Holocaust survivors. And again, we're just talking about the Jewish survivors here. There were many other people, LGBTQ communities, devout Christians that would have stood in the way to seeing things like that happen. Educators were some of the first to go. The Romani people, anyone with a disability, whether it's physical or mental. So there were millions and millions more that were put. But I'm here to talk about the 6 million Jews. And even then, I'm not here to talk about 6 million. I'm here to tell you the story of one who survived, my father. And here it is. Okay. A little bit. Sorry. My father, Armin Gluck, was born in Tornyos-Palca, that's how that's pronounced, Hungary in April 1925. That would be the circle up in the top right corner here. Not far from the Ukrainian border. Depends on what day you ask because the borders have changed pretty constantly for about 60 years now. But he is from that area. Transylvania is something a lot of people know, have heard from different movies. That's about that same area. He was born there. He was one of 9 children to a very, very poor family. His father was a rabbi, but it was in a very small village where no one had any money. My father had a good sense of humor. At least I thought it was good because I have his sense of humor. But he used to always say that they were so poor they could only afford to go window shopping once a month. That was his big one. He was one of the youngest of the 9 children. When he was 8 years old, his mother passed away. Nothing to do with the war, just really bad health care in a small village where no one had money and science wasn't where it is today. So his mother passed away when he was 8 years old. His father passed away, they say, from a broken heart when he was 9 years old. So the 2 oldest were 17 and 18. They kind of raised the family along with the village, which is why my mentality has always been it takes a village. When I was a teacher here in Tennessee for 11 years, I always tried to support the kids and get other teachers involved, not just teaching, but with the community itself, because like you're doing here, a big part of Rotary is it takes a community. And how can you serve that community? So, or for his community, none of them would have lived. This is the only known picture we have from when they were younger. And it's not all 9 kids, obviously. Magda, who is the baby in this, is about 10 months older than my father. So this was before he was born, obviously. This is the only picture we have. The oldest sister, Margaret, and then the little guy with the cap is not really as small as he looks. It's hard to tell from that picture, but he's seated, which is why he looks smaller, but he's actually the second oldest in this. They were the 2 that came to America before the war started. And that's the reason that the mother's face is gone. Margaret cut the mother's face out, put it in a locket that disappeared years later. That is the only known picture we have. So I've seen my grandmother's hands. That's as close as I can get. There's twins there that will come in very important later, twin girls, Irene and Pearl. And then after my father, there were 2 more boys that were born. Margaret and Joe, like I said, came here to the United States, tried to save up money, tried to bring over the rest of the family, but fortunately before they could, borders got closed and the rest of the family, 7 of them, were stuck in Hungary during the course of the war. Oh, we're not quite there yet, sorry. Okay. I don't write anything down, I just speak. My father in the 8th grade was thrown out of school for the crime of being Jewish. That was it. There was no other reasoning behind it. It's just Jews didn't need an education because the process of dehumanizing was going on. And by that point, they had agreed that Jews didn't need an education because they're going to be used basically for slave labor. They're going to be a workforce. So there was no reason to educate them. They were expendable. So he was at gunpoint, forced out of school, never had a formal education beyond that. But like I said, spoke 6 languages, could do advanced math in his head, was one of the smartest people I'd ever met. And I've met a lot of people. He just never had the opportunity to get that formal education. Okay. So when he turned 18, the Hungarian army drafted him. Hungary was in a little bit of a unique situation on how they handled the Holocaust or the Nazi takeover. They were approached by the Nazis and they were given a choice. I'm oversimplifying it. Basically, it was join us or we're just going to take over. Either way, you're going to join us. It's just a matter of, do we come in here with guns blazing or are you going to join? So the Hungarian response was, we'll join you if you let us control and take care of our own Nazis, our own Jews. They didn't want the Nazis coming in. So they set up labor divisions of their army, and my father was drafted. They weren't given guns, they weren't given weapons, they were given shovels or work tools. Well, probably a good reason my second career was as a teacher. My father's principal was the sergeant when he entered the army and remembered my father and was handing out the duties to everyone and told my father, you're going to be a cook, a baker. That saved my father's life because he now had access to food. My father tried to say, I don't know how. You're a baker. Just go with it. And that's what my father did. So he was in the Hungarian army, and their job, as it says, was repairing roads and runways for the German army so that they could fly in and out of Hungary, into Russia, into wherever they needed to go from there. But again, my father had to do part of that, but also was in the kitchens cooking, so had access to food, kept strong. This, by the way, is just a stock photo. They didn't have any type of selfies back then, so. Okay. Towards the end of the war, it was either late December or early January. We don't know because they didn't really have accurate records, and my father lost track of all concept of time. He just knows it was the dead of winter. So it was either late December of 44 or January of 45. He was in a 300-mile march called a Death March. There were many of them, so his was not the only one. Across Hungary through the Austrian Alps into Austria and ended up in a camp called Mauthausen. Okay. Along the way, the Hungarian guards, periodically, they would stop for the night. There were no trains for them. They just walked. But along his walk, the Hungarian guards, some of them were sympathetic. When they'd stop for the night, they'd say, we're going into the town. You guys stay here with no guards. They stayed. People question me when I talk about this, but you have to get into the mindset of they had been turned in by neighbors. They didn't know who to trust. They didn't know where to go. They didn't, in hindsight, we know the war was going to end in a few months. They didn't know that. So how do you survive? Where do you go? What are you going to do? It's the dead of winter. They're in a place they don't know. Maybe they find a barn. Maybe they get shot as soon as they hit the woods. They didn't know what was going to happen. So they kept walking. Some of them did not keep walking. They were at one point for a few days walking alongside of a frozen river. A number of people decided to take their own lives because it was the last thing they had control over, rather than let Nazis kill them once they got turned over at the border with Austria with, quote, true Nazis. Rather than keep going, they took their own lives. My father said he wasn't brave enough to do that. That was his quote, which stayed with me because I always thought he was a very brave man, but the way your mindset can change how you look at a situation from trauma like that. So he justified what was going on for the other people because of that. So he made it all the way. He survived. About 300 people survived out of 800 that started. The guards, once they were turned over to the actual Nazis, the guards had little games they would play, like opening up with a machine gun blast to see how many people they could kill with one blast. Just periodically, because these were, again, not humans. They had been dehumanized in the eyes of these specific people, and they were treated as if their lives didn't matter. So, sorry. Dead battery. Yeah, this was the prize for the lucky winners that survived the march. Mauthausen concentration camp. Those are the gates to the camp. Again, a stock photo. My father remembered, and this stayed with me, that as he started getting closer and closer to the camp, they were encouraged. They didn't know what to expect. They were cold. They were half frozen to death, and they saw smoke rising and thought, ooh, there's going to be fires. We can stay warm. And then he saw all the firewood lined up, piles of firewood lined up, stacked. Good, we're going to be able to actually like stay warm. As they got closer, he came to realize that the firewood was human bodies that had been stacked up, and the fires were from the crematoriums. So I won't stay on this for long, but those were the piles he saw and the conditions that he dealt with. May 5th, 1945, liberation. Okay, he had survived, again, because when he was turned over from the Hungarian guards to the Austrian, they told them, this guy knows how to bake. He can make a bread out of sawdust. So they actually gave him a shot to bake for them. And he proved himself. And because of that, they gave him, which is unheard of, they gave him access into their side of the camp under guard to go into their kitchens and bake for them on special occasions. It wasn't often, but it was enough times to bake a cake for a guard's son or an anniversary, not for the people that ran the place because they had access to real food, but for the lesser individuals, they gave him access. And what he would do is he had nice new boots because one of his friends took it off of a dead body. So he was able to get new boots after his march. And he had talked about that quite a bit, how guilty he always felt in having these nice new boots. But the other person couldn't use them anymore. He would tuck his pants into the boots and leave them the style back then, they were kind of baggy. They became natural pockets. He would steal food. I'm not advocating stealing, I'm advocating surviving. He stole food, brought it back to his barracks, and kept a number of people. He's credited with keeping a bunch of people in his barracks alive because of the food that he brought in. Okay. One of the gentlemen that he helped save was a family friend from the next couple villages away, where they had a little bit more money in that village. His cousin lived across the street from this other family. And my father would spend summers with the cousin's family because he was young, and the older ones would have to go to work. So they kind of farmed out the younger brothers and sisters before the war. Well, he recognized this one young man, he was 14, 15 in his barracks, as the younger brother that always tagged along with his group of friends. The younger brother of one of his friends from that other village. They played soccer together. They were in a soccer league. And here was this little younger brother trying to survive. My father helped give him food. Me growing up, that was my Uncle Tibor. Okay. Tibor Rubin grew up in those camps, came to America after they were liberated, and wanted to give back. He tried to join the American Army, spoke almost no English. Went back a few months later, tried again, still couldn't speak. Went back a third time, the sergeant said, you're not going to give up, are you? He said, nope, I want to be a GI Joe. He joined the army. He went to Korea. I didn't know this until about 2001 because he was a very modest man. He was just, quote, my uncle, family friend. That's when President Bush at the time was going through old records, found what he had done in Korea. His sergeant hated Jews, gave him all these impossible missions to do, trying to kill him off. Alone, he was sent out on patrol alone. He did all these different things single-handedly. He was nominated 3 times for the Medal of Honor and never got it because the commanding officer kept getting killed and the new one would come in. And so the orders were lost by the sergeant to write up a commendation for him. So he was presented it in 2001. He's the only Holocaust survivor to get the Medal of Honor. And he, in his speech, said he wouldn't be there if it weren't for my father, who got invited to the same presentation, the same, it's not called an award, it's a presentation of his medal. So again, I'm very proud of my father for that, for a lot of things that he did. Moving on from that, I mentioned that my aunts were twins. They went to Auschwitz. At Auschwitz, Dr. Mengele liked to experiment on human beings, and he loved twins because you had a test subject that way. They never spoke about what happened. Not to their husbands, not to their kids. Their stories died with them. Again, part of the motivation for me to be here and tell my father's story, because there's so many people I meet, including children of liberators. I just talked to someone Monday who is a child of a liberator from here in Tennessee and doesn't know anything about that story. The father refused to talk about it. He would talk about the war, but he would not talk about what he saw and what happened to him when he entered those camps. And that's something that continues. It's probably a third of the stories that have actually been shared and passed down. My uncle, who, well, I think it's in the next picture. So no, it's coming up soon. We'll get to my uncle in a minute. Sorry. When my father was liberated, the first thing any good-hearted person would do, feed them. When you see these walking skeletons, feed them. These people hadn't seen food for months and months. They couldn't handle a real meal or a hot meal. A lot of people ended up getting dysentery, getting all sorts of, their bodies were rejecting the food. They got very, very sick. My father doesn't remember 2 weeks of his life because of the fever and just vomiting, and I won't go into it, you're eating. Sorry, but what had happened to him for those first 2 weeks of liberation, he has no clue. He went to a DP camp, they're called, or a displaced persons camp. Okay. In the camps, you stayed there until someone either sent for you or you were able to get paperwork to say who you were and get IDs and move on. That's Margaret, the oldest one that came to America, with the very youngest of the kids. Okay. His name is Bernard. And my next oldest uncle, Bernard was the very youngest. The next oldest, or the next youngest, I should say, was Ernie. And they went to Auschwitz, and on day 1 of Auschwitz, they were separated. You go left, you go right. My uncle Ernie, to his dying day, lived with the trauma and the guilt of not staying with his brother, who was put to death immediately, or insisting the brother stayed with him. And so he passed. Years and years later, I believe it was around 2003, when Ernie passed away, they uncovered his gravestone. It's part of the Jewish tradition that about a year after someone dies, to uncover it, it's called an unveiling, and family comes together one more time to talk about that person and see their stone for the first time. When they did, his wife said they got his birthday wrong. My father and a couple of other siblings that were still alive then told the story that no one had ever spoken, that Benjamin lived by name, and Ernest was the youngest by name. Ernest is the one that died, but there was no paperwork for Benjamin. So, or for Benjamin. So Benjamin took Ernie's paperwork, birthday, and name and lived the rest of his life under that birthday and that name. Probably out of the guilt and the fear that he would someday be deported because he came here with false papers. So it was never spoken about until after his death. His own wife and kids didn't know that his real name, I said Benjamin, Bernard, excuse me, was Bernard and not Ernie. So that just gives you an idea of the kind of generational trauma that is passed along and the fears that these people lived with, even though they were here in America, knowing that they were free, still lived with that fear that things could still happen again. My father made it onto a ship, made his way down to France, made it onto a ship crossing the Mediterranean. He wanted to go to Israel. Unfortunately, at the time, it was under the control of the British. They had ships throughout the Mediterranean blockading it so that Jews couldn't go there because they didn't want to lose control of that area. He was captured, the whole ship was captured, turned around and sent to Cyprus Island. He spent about a year at Cyprus Island. And then they commandeered another ship at night, kept all the lights off, ran the blockade, and he made it to Israel. Once he was there, that's actually the first photo I have of my father when he was in the Israeli army. That is a stock photo, but his job was during a war, during a fight. He manned a cannon. During a day of peace, he was a baker, okay, and a cook. His brother Michael had come to Canada. Most of his family had either immigrated to America, one in Canada, and a sister went to Australia. So they sent for my father when his time was up with the army. He migrated or immigrated to Canada and lived with my uncle up there, his brother, Michael, and got a 2-week visa to come down to Connecticut, where most of the rest of his family was in Connecticut. Margaret had gone to Connecticut long before the war. She settled there, so the rest of the family settled in Connecticut. So he was coming down to visit. Margaret had friends everywhere and said to this one woman, "Hey, I want you to meet my brother when he comes down." She said, "No, I don't need to meet anyone. I'm fine. I date people. I'm good." She said, No, it's not that kind of thing. He's just coming for 2 weeks, needs someone to show him around. She said, No, I'm fine. She showed her a picture of my father. That one on the left. 10 days later, my mother married him. Okay. So they got married. They were together for 64 years until my father passed away. They had moved from Connecticut up to Vermont somewhere along the way in 1969. Okay, and that's where I was raised from the age of 5 until I was 18, up in Vermont. Right next door, we lived next door to the one brother that kind of was halfway between Montreal and Connecticut in Vermont. So we ended up right next door to him. Joe, who had come over to America, he was the oldest boy. He came to America and actually served in the South Pacific, okay, in the Navy. So they were married 10 days later. This is, yes, I was blonde, as it says. That's me on my dad's lap back in 1965. Okay, my sister, she's 2.5 years older than me, Shelley. My mom, who is the love of my life, other than my wife in a whole different way, but she is still with us at 96 years old. When my father passed, I got her to finally move down here with us. So she's with us in Old Hickory. And yes, we had a restaurant. No surprise. Okay. My father opened a restaurant up there, sat about 250 people in the main dining room. served prime rib and baked stuffed shrimp and all the good stuff that's not kosher. Okay. We had a really, I grew up eating. That was my life. But that was because he didn't have parents to teach him. They grew up poor. He was raised with no food. Food was love. I've always, and for a lot of Jewish people, okay, someone made me a plate to take home today. Okay, it's a Jewish mother thing. And then this, I like to end with 2011. He lived a full life. He lived till 2017, but you can see the joy in my parents' eyes there. So the moral of the story is no matter how bad things are, and this is something I tell all the kids, no matter how much you struggle, no matter what bad happens to you, and bad things happen to everyone, you have the opportunity to go on with your life. You have the opportunity to make a life. Okay? So that is the moral of the story that I like to share with kids and with you today. And that is the end.
So how do you deal with folks who say the Holocaust never happened?
I don't deal with people that say that because, as I said earlier, that would be like saying that shirt isn't blue. That shirt isn't red. Like, where do you go with that? It is what it is. You can't deny it. I have more problem with Holocaust distortion, where that's going on a lot with a lot of European countries right now, where they are distorting the numbers or distorting their own involvement, saying, well, the Nazis did these bad things, but we didn't. And every Holocaust survivor I've ever spoken to has repeated to me that they were more in fear of going back home after the war because it's their neighbors that turned them in. The Nazis wouldn't have known who they were if it weren't for the people that they'd grown up with and known that turned them in for a pound of sugar or a pack of cigarettes. So that distortion that you see with a lot of governments trying to cast the blame just to the Nazis and not take any credit for what, and not they, but what their past generations had done, that's more disturbing to me. But a blue shirt is a blue shirt. Yes.
You mentioned Nazis several times. Were they a different group besides the German army itself?
Very much so. The regular army was fighting a war. The Nazis, the Gestapo, the SS, they were tasked with killing the undesirables. Very different groups of people. So again, and even within that, there were a number of people that were forced to be in those groups. The one thing I do know is if anyone's ever read a book called not Common Man, Ordinary Men, it goes into the mindset of how people, not the Goerings and the Goebbels and the leaders, but how the normal people did what they did. And there are report after report where there were groups that they had to go into an area and kill 1,000 Jews that were lined up. And they were told, if you can't do it, say so, and you'll just guard while someone else does the shooting. And on occasion, people did step away from it. They couldn't bring themselves to that. But at that point, it's a choice. And a lot of people didn't want to, and you get into the whole psychology of brothers in arms, and you don't want to let your other men down and force them to do the killings. You can go on and on about these studies, but the bottom line is no one was ever forced to do these killings. And yet these killings went on. So, yes.
You said that your father was taken to school around 8th grade, so probably around 14. So when was he like kind of drafted and when he did that?
At 18.
At 18?
Yes.
Okay.
He did some type of intern. I don't know what it was. I think he basically worked as like a clerk in a store unloading boxes and that kind of stuff.
And your father said, like, in some things you said, he didn't have that hate in his heart. Like, did you ever ask him, like, where that ever came from? And I have one more question. I'm done.
How he
That's
was able to
yeah,
not
it's pretty
hate.
incredible, right? I mean,
It's just the person he was. There are definitely people I've encountered that still hold on to that hate. Hate will kill you. Hate will tear you up inside. So I'm really proud of that. I'm proud of him on so many levels. And I think a huge part of what I do, it's because I want to honor my dad. But yeah, that hate definitely, that was unique for him. I won't say unique, he's the only one, but unique that there were a lot of people that held grudges, held fears. And my father just dealt with things and moved on. I don't know how.
incredible. Last question. Have you ever been to Hungary where?
No, I asked growing up for years, he never wanted to go back there for those same reasons we just talked about. And then there were too many other places I wanted to go for my own enjoyment. However, now with this position, I've been there a little over a year, and we are going to be doing a summer institute this year with some amazing speakers over 3 days for teachers throughout the state. We're bringing in, probably there's going to be between 100, 150 teachers coming to this. And for that, we're going to do that every other year. And then on the opposite year, we're going to start taking trips and bringing our teacher fellows, people that work with our organization as teachers throughout the state, to next year, it's going to be Washington, D.C. And then 2 years from that, it will be either Europe to see the camps or Israel itself. And then whichever one we don't do will be 2 years after that. So I'll finally get my chance, I hope. My sister just came back. She and her husband went to Austria for a ski trip. Must be nice. Anyways, they just came back from skiing in Austria, and while she was there, she went to see some camps, but she didn't go to Mauthausen, but she went to some camps.
Yeah, I was in Europe a few years ago, and Budapest is an amazing city, but did a lot of walking tours. And unfortunately, it's crazy how many bad people there are that's overshadowed by the bad people because the Hungarian government, what they did to, they basically, delivering them on a silver platter. So it's.
Well, I know what you're saying, but I want to disagree with one piece of that. There are a lot of bad people. There are a lot more good people. You guys wouldn't be in this room doing what you do if you weren't good people, I hope. But the problem is the voice of hatred, the voice of bad people is much louder, even on an individual. And we need to help teach the kids how to stand up to the bully. Genocide is simply bullying to the greatest extent you can bring it. And if we teach people how not to bully, and again, I'm not saying beat up the bullies, because that just begets more hate. But if you learn how to take a non-aggressive stance of, hey, don't do that, you're better than that, give them their out. Learning the right verbiage. That's something I taught as a teacher to my students, is how to de-escalate situations and give people their out to help stop bullying. I think is the only way, but we have to organize good, because that small outspoken bad is so loud that people, without someone standing up to it, people think that that's the voice of everyone. And I know it's not. So it's a long way of answering your question. I'm sorry. I promise I'll make the next answer short.
I'm just gonna ask you, is this on? Just real quick, I know there's a memorial at the Capitol. Can you talk about how that came about and how we see that?
Well, at the State Museum, there's a, it's not the Capitol itself, there's a memorial, or part of the Tennessee State Museum, they have some artifacts. We are actually in discussions with them as we speak, maybe actually as we speak, to try to increase our stay there, because we have whole sets of letters and biographies. On our website, we have videos, interviews with not just survivors that wound up in Tennessee. So there's a direct Tennessee correlation, but with a number of the liberators. Our group was started by survivors and liberators who either were from Tennessee or wound up in Tennessee. We just lost about 6 months ago, Jimmy Gentry, who is from the Knoxville area, who was just an incredible guy. He was one of the first through the gates. I believe it was at Dachau. So that is how our whole organization started, is through those people pushing to make things like this happen. So, and then there's also a larger memorial, not a museum, but just a memorial statue with names and things. That's at the Gordon Jewish Community Center, which is out in the West End, right by Percy Warner Park. Okay. Yes.
Do you know how many Holocaust survivors still alive?
It's estimated somewhere about 100,000. But minute by minute, we are losing more. It's at the age, the youngest Holocaust survivor, as far as being in the camps, is going to be in their mid to late 90s. And then there's child survivors who were hidden children or refugees, because there are almost no survivors from the camps that were children because they couldn't work. So why keep them alive? And they were brutally murdered, but there are child survivors still out there. I was with one yesterday that we went to a school down near Pulaski, Linville. Never knew there was a Linville. They didn't know there were Jews. No, we were the first Jews they ever met for almost every teacher there. But that is where my mission is. Not to say I won't go speak at a Jewish school or a synagogue. We'll go anywhere, but they know what happened. It's the opportunity to speak at a school like I did yesterday, where they've never seen a Jewish person. They don't know the story of the Holocaust, and to bring a survivor there and be able to make it personal and talk about what she went through. She was born in 1940 in Berlin and lived her whole life until she was 21 in the aftermath of the war and the hatred that was still there, to the point where in 2014, I believe it was, when her mother passed away, she went to Germany. Her mom never left Germany. The rest of the whole family was wiped out, except for her mother. When she spoke when she went to the funeral, her mother made her promise to say a Jewish prayer over her body, and she did, at which point the mother's best friend, who was sitting right there, said, so you are Jewish. Because the mother had hidden that her whole life because she didn't want to deal with it. So those things, I mean, it keeps happening. There are problems with anti-Semitism today, but there's problems with all sorts of hatred today. Not to make light of anyone else, that things are happening in the world that aren't really necessarily the way they should be happening. Which is why I try to go out there and speak about what's happening. So. Thank you. Sorry.
You're fine. So thank you, Ken, for sharing your family story. That was super powerful. And as a gift for speaking to us, we'll give you a pen with our club's logo. This is a book that we read to first graders about Rotary, and if you'll sign it, we will tell them about your visit and about your organization. So thank you for that. Anything else for the good of Rotary? Betsy? Okay, great. Anything else? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.